Wolfman. I just got out of the movie theater. Um, there was only 5 or 6 people in my theater actually on opening night, so definitely not even close to the turnout that I saw at Nosferatu just about 3 weeks or so back. The movie itself, just kind of go through a quick as far as the information on the movie. So it's got Christopher Abbott and Julie Garner, I believe is her name. It's the girl from Ozark. And, they're okay in it. Nothing really special. There's a couple of child actors. To me, it kind of feels a bit disconnected with the acting, and just the connections are not very believable, and they feel very surface level to me. The writer and director of the film, his claim to fame is the Saw series. He wrote that. He may have directed it, I'm not sure, but he definitely wrote it. And in 2020, I believe, is when he wrote and directed The Invisible Man, which was pretty well received, especially critically. I was kind of lukewarm on that movie. It didn't really do that much for me personally, but actually, to me, his masterpiece came out about 2 years before that in 2018. It's a movie called Upgrade. That movie is fantastic and is actually one of my favorite movies of 2018. Really great movie, and in fact, they're supposed to be making a TV series version. Hopefully that actually comes to fruition, because I would definitely be interested to see that. So that's kind of what's going on. The movie, kind of opens with the lead, Christopher Abbott, when he's a boy. He is living with his father in rural Oregon, and they're going out hunting. And he says that they're going out, I think his dad says that they're going out at like 0700, so that means 7 o'clock in the morning, going out hunting. And while they're hunting, they spot this wolf man. They have this encounter with one out in the woods, and then they go back inside, and he's kind of lying to his son about what it was, but then his son overhears him on the radio talking to like a neighbor out there about what this thing is, and he plans to kill it so he can protect his son. And the thing that I guess was weird to me right off the bat is that they keep talking about not going out at night, making sure that the forest is dangerous, don't go out at night, and try to get back inside before it gets dark. But there's a couple things that are weird about that to me. Like, if they left at 0700, and then before they come home, he makes a point to say that they still have a little time before it gets dark out. So the wolf is active at not just at night but during the day, because they encountered it during the day. They left during the morning and they saw it at some point during the day. So that, I don't really understand the point of that. The Wolfman, I guess, is active 24/7. Doesn't really matter if it's day or night. It kind of gets established. A little bit contradictory, or kind of confusing or weird there. And then it's fast forwards 30 years, and Christopher Abbott now is married, to Julia Garner. I hope I'm saying her name right. It's Julia or Julie Garner, something like that. And they now have a little girl who's about the same age as he was as a boy at the beginning of the movie, when he's there with his father. And they're living in the city. I think it's supposed to be in California. And they are just kind of doing their thing. There's a moment that happens kind of early on where he sort of snaps at his daughter because he's trying to protect her, so he gets kind of angry. And then he apologizes for it, and I guess that's supposed to kind of parallel his upbringing. And there's a quote later on where Julie Garner, is telling her daughter that his dad was infected and made him sick as well. So I guess the message is like, don't try to protect your children, or if you do try to protect them, don't do it in a way that causes you to lash out emotionally, because that's traumatic and can infect them, and then they can carry that trauma forward to their kids. I mean, that kind of feels like the basic message that they're trying to tell. There's supposed to be this connection between the family where the dynamic is that the daughter's a little bit closer to Christopher Abbott, and the husband and wife are kind of distant in their relationship, and they're both kind of depressed. They're not really happy, but they're trying to work on it. But I don't know, they don't really explore that angle too much, and it's not very believable to me. They both come across kind of shallow, like I said in the beginning, a little bit unlikable maybe. So anyway, they're in the city, and he gets word that his father has died, and so he wants to go to the farm to gather his things. And he wants his wife and kid to come with him. So they go on this trip up to Oregon with a moving truck, and they encounter the neighbor's son, who was about his age. He apparently just stayed around and just didn't really leave, and now kind of spends his days up in the deer stand all day, because that's where he is whenever they drive up there. When they get there, it was a little weird, because they're like, I guess this isn't the right road. Let me check my phone. Oh, I don't have service. I mean, I don't know about you, but most of the time, if you're going to go on a long road trip, especially to an area you maybe not be super familiar with, especially if you haven't been there in years, because apparently he left once he was old enough to leave, and hasn't been back in many years. Because like I said, it does that fast forward to 30 years later. So he's just kind of driving out there by memory, and of course he gets lost. He's in the wrong place, and neither of them are checking their phones until they need it, and then they check and realize that they don't have signal. So usually what most normal people would do, is they would have their phone up, set to navigate to the address of where they're going, and then that way most modern phones are going to kind of download the route, so that even if you lose signal, it's still going to navigate you to where you need to your destination. So it's kind of weird. They don't even look at their phone until they realize that they don't know where they are. So that kind of feels like lazy writing. It doesn't feel very realistic or believable to me there. So then, of course, what happens is they end up in the driveway of the neighbor. You never see who that neighbor is. You just see the boy now, who is now fully grown, just like Christopher Abbott. So he's kind of hanging out in a deer stand. He then gets in the vehicle with them, because he's like, hey, I can kind of show you where to go. So he's leading them down the road to get to his father's farm. And then suddenly the Wolfman is there in the road. So he swerves off the road, crashes. The neighbor kid, falls out of the truck, and the Wolfman kills him. And then Christopher Abbott gets his wife and daughter, and they go running through the woods, and they just happen to find the farmhouse. Wow, how convenient. So he's got the keys to the farmhouse. I don't really know how he got the keys, but he got them at some point. Somebody somewhere who told him that his dad was dead also gave him the keys to the house. I don't know. It's not really touched on or explained. But anyway, they get to the house, they go inside, and then they close the door. And apparently just closing the door makes it so the Wolfman can't get inside the house. So they close the door, they lock it. They do put like a dresser in front of the door, whatever, but it's really weird, because there's all these glass windows. Why doesn't he just bust the window and come inside at any time? There's windows all over the place. But that's it. There's like a front door and a back door, and the Wolfman never tries to enter the house except by those two mediums. And if they're locked and closed, he just doesn't come inside. It's like a vampire, like he has to be invited in or something. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. I don't know why he just doesn't bust through the window. So, that's kind of going on. You're like, man, this is really kind of lame, and nothing's really interesting is happening. So then, the next thing that happens is, wow, what does happen next? I have to kind of think back through. I mean, I just saw this, but I was kind of zoning out a little bit at that point, kind of losing interest. The father, Christopher Abbott, decides that they need to just try to wait it out. So the rest of the movie just takes place over the course of that night. basically just with one major set area, which is inside the house. So they're just hanging out inside the house trying to wait it out. But they realize that Christopher Abbott actually got scratched by the Wolfman earlier after they had their crash in the forest in the moving truck. So now he's starting to slowly have symptoms. He's starting to kind of transform. He at first is just kind of sick. It's like a disease, and he sees them differently than they see him, and he starts to be like hyper aware of sounds, starts to go through kind of a transformation, and then it reaches a point where he can't communicate in a way that they can hear, that they can hear or understand him. It's like he's speaking a different language, and vice versa. Again, I mean, if you think about it, this is such a heavy-handed, kind of ham-fisted message. It feels very preachy, very similar to what they were trying to do with The Invisible Man, which is why I didn't really like that too much. It just felt way too obvious and way too forced. And those kind of social messages that you're trying to tackle take precedence over just like telling a good story or having like a good monster movie. But that's what this filmmaker, writer, director likes to do. He did it with The Invisible Man. Now he's doing it again, kind of the same thing. Yeah, so basically, like, you know, if you traumatize folks and you get that sickness, now your perception of the world is different. The way that you see people, the way that you communicate is different. Maybe you talk or try to communicate in a way that that others can't hear, and kind of vice versa. So, you know, this, again, we're talking about kind of generational trauma here, and the kind of father-son or father-child dynamics. So anyway, that's kind of, you know, you just kind of see this happening over and over and over again. And again, rather than those things being like at the service of the movie to kind of amplify what's happening with the Wolfman and that kind of monster movie fun and dynamic, it's like the monster movie stuff is really just there as kind of the background, and really what they're trying to do is push this message instead. So I thought that was a little bit, to me, I was a little bit disappointed with that. So, you know, as he starts to transform, they decide that, hey, you know, he's getting more and more sick. We need to try to find a way to get him some help. So they look outside and realize, oh, there's an old beat down truck that looks like it hasn't been driven in 10 plus years. So they try to get into the truck, and of course it's this slow scene, and you know, you can tell exactly what's going to happen. Of course, as soon as they get it started, then the wolf is going to, then the, you know, the first Wolfman is going to show up, and that's exactly what happens. As soon as they are able to finally get the truck started, the Wolfman shows up, pulls out the gear selector so they can't, you know, shift gears, busts his hand through the windshield, and then him and Christopher Abbott kind of get into this fight, but it happens off camera. You don't even see the fight, and then the one Wolfman just kind of vanishes, and then Christopher Abbott shows back up at the door. Julia Garner and the daughter go back inside the house. Christopher Abbott shows up at the door. They let him in. He's in there, and there's kind of these tensions between them, and then the other wolf shows up again. And suddenly those tensions between them vanish. He like very quickly switches into this role of like protector again. So when the other wolf is not there, he's not the protector. He doesn't. He's like losing his connection with his family. But when the other wolf shows up, suddenly he's like locked in, engaged. He's going to do everything he can to sacrifice himself to protect his family. And that's exactly what happens. The wolf is there. The original Wolfman is there, and they're kind of fighting. And I will say that fight is probably the highlight of the movie. It's definitely too short. I would have liked to see them extend that, kind of have some more fun with it. But that was, to me, kind of the highlight of the movie. Was that fight was actually kind of cool. A lot of things are pretty dark and very dimly lit. It's kind of hard to see exactly what's happening, but what you can see looks pretty cool. A lot of practical effects. And yeah, so the next part I'm going to talk a little is I'm definitely going to go into spoilers a little bit here. So if you don't want to hear the spoilers, then probably stop listening at this point. But basically, they fight, and Christopher Abbott kills the other Wolfman, which after he kills him, he looks at his arm and realizes, hey, this guy's the same tattoo as my dad from the beginning. I killed my dad. Okay. So then he gets all upset and runs away. And then after he leaves, then he goes through a kind of classic Wolfman transformation scene, which to me, I mean, the ones that they made decades and decades ago in earlier Wolf movies looked better than this. It looked okay, but it was just very short and brief and quick. And again, it's like they didn't want to focus on that kind of stuff. I really would have liked to see them dial in on that and focus on it. But it was just very quick, and suddenly now he's the full-on Wolfman. He goes back to the house, and now suddenly he is smart enough to actually break into the house, not using just the front or the back door. He actually climbs up, and I guess he must break in through like a window or something on the second floor. And then he comes down the stairs. He's inside the house. They kind of has a quick little skirmish, with his wife and daughter. And then they flee the house. He chases them, and you're just kind of getting this vibe that I don't know, it's just like he's basically chasing them, and then it shifts into this almost home alone kind of a thing where they're like laying traps for him. They put this they put this bear trap out. He steps in it, and of course it kind of traps him, and then they Julia Garner and the daughter run away. He's there, just kind of trapped in the barn, and then he decides to gnaw off his, to kind of gnaw through the bone of his leg to, above where that bear trap is, so that he can kind of crawl away, and then he eventually starts kind of running on all fours. It's like having missing his foot doesn't really keep him from running quickly to kind of chase them, but I don't know. It's he's kind of chasing him, and then he finally gets to him, and then it was feeling very reminiscent of The Fly, actually, because The Fly, if you watch that movie, is and I'm talking about the remake from the 1980s with Jeff Goldblum. It's a very sad movie, and you watch this guy is just kind of going further and further downhill, and eventually at the very end he's like holding the barrel of the gun that his loved one has up to his head and just wants her to kill him. And that's basically what happens at the very end of this. He very slowly goes up over the deer stand. She has a rifle on him, and he's just basically saying, shoot me. So they do that. They shoot and kill him. They're sad, but then they see a beautiful shot of rural Oregon with some mountains in the background, and then the movie ends. That's the same view that they saw earlier in the film whenever it was the father and son. So that's the movie. I guess my initial thoughts is that it was mostly pretty lame. I think that it does get at least a couple of points for that cool Wolfman versus Wolfman fight. The practical effects did look good. The scene where he's actually gnawing off his own leg looked pretty good. So some of the gore stuff looked pretty solid. And I think for those aspects alone, I would give it a 3 out of 10, but everything else was just meh, nothing really special or interesting happening. So overall, probably a 3 out of 10, maybe. Pretty forgettable. I don't really recommend it. I don't think I'll ever watch it again. Again, those social themes are so heavy-handed that they don't focus enough on just making a fun, entertaining monster movie. It's just kind of, depressing with these disconnected characters. There's no humor in it. The kid actors with the families, I don't know, it just didn't. I didn't really buy it, and there was no real connection or chemistry, I thought, between the husband and wife. And towards the end, it just feels like they're never really in danger. He's chasing him and chasing him and chasing him, but there's never really any tension. You never get the sense that that Julie Garner is actually going to be harmed by him, or that the daughter's actually going to be harmed by him. In fact, neither of them get harmed at all. I don't think that anything ever lays a hand on either of them. It's just, I don't know if that's a modern filmmaking thing where women just, can't be harmed, or like we can't show them being hurt. I think that, older movies would do that, and it would be more devastating, and it makes it feel like there's real stakes because the characters are vulnerable. If the characters can't be harmed, there's no tension. And without the tension, I don't really believe or buy what's happening on screen. So, yeah, I don't know. Those are my thoughts. Not really a great movie. A couple of neat things to see there. And overall, if you like this guy's work, go back and watch the first Saw movie and watch 2018 Upgrade. And personally, I would like to see him get back to that movie. That's just a straight up badass sci-fi action movie. Very entertaining, really fun. Yes, it's got themes in it, but again, they focused on making sure that the movie itself was actually entertaining, something that you'd actually want to watch. And I would like to see movies get back to that instead of leaning so heavily into just constant social commentary and using movies as these kind of vessels of, preaching like a narrative or agenda to someone in this very heavy-handed way. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Don't recommend, and there's definitely better Wolfman movies out there. So, all right, see you next time.